Oh,
Hello, hello. Thought you were in a forest at some point. In a,
is it
in a,
the cool palm trees behind me?
looks like a
Or-
cabin in the wood. I love it.
yeah, it actually is a cabin in the woods. It's an old
Nice.
hunting cabin in Oakland. Used to be a thing 100 years ago.
Nice. Looks sunny outside as well. Very nice.
Getting there. How's the weather where you are?
I'm in Paris and the weather was very good until this week. And this week we are back to winter again. It's really weird.
Hello.
What are we waiting for? Oh, Lee, right.
Waiting for the host.
Only changes.
Okay, in Lee's absence, I'll get us kicked off. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the May edition of the GraphQL Specification Working Group. By being here, we have all agreed to the specification membership agreement, the participation guidelines, the contribution guide, the code of conduct, links to all of which can be found in the agenda. And we are also aware that these meetings are recorded. They are published to YouTube, and that we use large language models and AI summary tools to summarize the notes for them. Speaking of notes, there is a notes document linked in the agenda. If there's anything that you think that the large language model won't be capturing well, please do contribute it to that notes file, and it will be then filed against the repository at a later date, probably next Thursday. Um, if anyone would like to take those notes, please do so, and also you are welcome to attribute yourself in the notes. Um, but since the language models have been doing a reasonably good job, I don't think we need to really call for volunteers anymore. Um, we'll start with a quick introduction of attendees. We'll do it in the order in which people are listed in the agenda, but I will, since Lee is still not here, I will take Lee's place up the top. Hello, everyone. My name is Benji.
Hi, my name's James.
Hey, I'm Martin.
Hi, Rob here.
Hello, Mark here.
Hi, I'm Matt.
Hey, I'm
Oh,
Benoit from
sorry.
Apollo. No worries, Benoit.
Hi, and Yaakov, I haven't yet added myself to the agenda,
I
but on it.
merged you. I just merged you.
And I'm Kawei.
And
Oh,
I'm Michael.
And I'm Pascal, but I'm no longer in the agenda.
Maybe
Most
that was a
likely that
conflict.
was a conflicted merge, I would
I'm
imagine.
I'm on it. I'm on it. I might have merged you out.
No. My bad. I'm sorry. I didn't open the pull request. I only did the commit.
Oh.
I
Okay, no worries.
even Michael, I even added you, so you're now in twice. Just saying, you know.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Well, that was a good microphone check as much as anything else. Cool. Let's do a quick review of the agenda. So today we are going to be looking at one of inhabitability. We're going to look at prohibiting root mutation and subscription types from implementing interfaces. We're going to talk about the potential for transferring projects such as GraphQL PHP into the GraphQL organization. And related to that, the project adoption guidelines. We're going to discuss the GraphQL over HTTP specification and about the directives on directives proposal. I'm just going to refresh the agenda to see if anything else came in with Pascal's latest merge. Any other topics that need to be on the list?
Um,
If
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, if there's time and I'm back in time, I might talk a little bit about gaps and show off the website preview and chat with Benji about that.
Okay, amazing. Yep. So we'll add gaps to the end if there's time. I also see that someone else has joined, maybe, or maybe that's just the camera's turned off. Okay, so
One second.
go on, Pascal.
If I have 1 minute, then my topic is done. So if I can go either at the end or at the beginning, that's fine.
All right, let's just do a tiny bit more housekeeping and then I'll hand it to you for 1 minute. So just a quick reminder that we have grants available for key initiatives. So if we are doing anything that warrants a grant or where a grant would help you to get the task that we want completed done, then please do submit a grant application. And with that, over to you, Pascal.
Thanks a lot. I probably don't even need 60 seconds. I just wanted to say that the Open Telemetry Semantic Conventions pull request I just posted into the channel is all the comments are resolved. And now it's a bit up to us to decide if this is ready to go in or not. I can make an issue on the work, like the main workgroup repository, that we can have a discussion there. But in the end, it's essentially just getting this approved so we can merge it into the semantic conventions report.
Awesome.
I love an issue. I
Yes.
don't always track the hotel working group, so if you could make an issue like as a placeholder, it would be.
Yeah, agreed. An issue would be a great start there. Also, is there any particular people that you think this would specifically benefit from? Obviously, observability is something that we all care about, but is there any particular, like, do you want maintainers of libraries in particular to pay attention to this, or is there anyone we should be reaching out to?
Generally, people with opinion, and also if someone has, that's what I was looking for in the hotel working group anyway, like huge production systems with maybe billions of people sending queries to it, then it would be interesting to have their thoughts of how the telemetry should look like.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for your work on that, Pascal, and your working group. This is really exciting to be at this stage where we're just basically asking for the final sign-off from the community, right? So very well done. Very exciting. I will one of inhabitability. There we go. One of inhabitability doesn't actually have someone assigned to it, but I'm assuming that's you, James.
It can be, but I'll admit that I'm not sure what the responsibilities are of the assignee. But
I
I'm
think
happy to.
I think I put it as a reminder that we need this merged in, like it looks like an important pull request. But if you don't mind, James, like you have more context, so if you can do it, would be very welcome.
Great. Okay, I think maybe it would start just like a quick 10-second description of the issue and then a status of like where things are at. Okay, so here's a link to the PR and also just share my screen real quick. One of these windows. So the general issue is that the rules of one-ofs allow types like this to be defined, but they actually, you cannot actually create a value for this type because the rules of one-of require that an A field be non-null. And so if you try to create a value for a type like this one, you end up with an infinite value. And so this is effectively the same problem that the existing rules around recursive input object types kind of are designed to prevent, where you should not be able to define a type for which you cannot create a value. So this is a little bit more broader than just like recursive one-ofs. You can have one-ofs that participate in like uninhabited graphs with other like non-one-of input objects. So overall, the shape of the problem is that I think and not just the shape of the problem, but what's proposed in this PR is to rework some of the rules around how recursive input objects are described to reflect one of input objects and the special considerations around those. So that's the general shape of the problem and the proposal. The state of things right now is there is a pull request open for GraphQL JS. I was actually just working through it today. There is I think, an open discussion item. Martin left a comment, and I kind of like tastelessly put a reply 10 seconds before I joined this call. So there is, I think, some more iteration there. Martin, okay. So that's where things are at. But I think I would agree with the assessment that it should probably get resolved pretty soon. And I think the way forward is to work through the kind of GraphQL JS PR and get that landed. But I'll be honest, I don't quite know what the process is. So I hand it over to somebody who knows more.
Yakov, if you're available, would you care to discuss the GraphQL JS side of this? You're still muted.
Sorry about that. Sure. So on the getting the PR into GraphQL JS is, I guess, a smaller part of the, a single part of the process to move forward. But in terms of that part, we need someone to basically just review your code who's a little bit more, who's willing to take on some responsibility to basically work side by side with the spec change and the pull request, just like you've done in making the changes, just to review them. So I would be, I think some people, right, have already chimed in, and I would be happy to, cede it to them in terms of the approvals. If once anyone who's looked it over looks good, is willing to give it an approval, and then we just have to resolve all those by the GitHub rules on our repo. We have to resolve all the conversations, which is also just a smart thing to do anyway. But once we can get the pull requests in before the spec change, and we usually do get the pull request in into GraphQL JS before the spec change, make sure that we like it, and that I'd love to expedite before V17 is released, because I think this might be technically a breaking change. Although if anyone has a schema with these problematic input values, they probably would like us to fix them for them. It just probably would be nice to get it in as part of the major.
Thank you, Yakov. Yeah, that's all sounds very good. The regarding the GraphQL.js pull request, I went through and reviewed all of the test cases. These all seem to be in alignment. So those make sense to me. I have not done a deep review of the actual code changes, but it is just the one file, source type validate. So hopefully at some point this can be done. Anyone else who's familiar with the GraphQL.js code base, if you could take some eyes as well, that would be fantastic. But yeah, let's keep this moving forwards. But I think this is an important thing.
Yeah.
I think Yakov's call as well for this to go into V17 makes sense. Go on, Matt.
I was going to say, I just looked at the comment I did. It's a diagnostic issue, right? It's a thing about like if you have a cycle, how do you report the cycle? Do you report on each node? Do you report like multiple issues or something like this? So I don't think it's blocking merging this pull request because it's already addressing something. Like I think the pull request is better than what we have before. Only thing is we can improve the diagnostics, but that can happen in the second stage.
Yeah. Go on, James.
I generally agree with you, but I think there's a difference between like does it emit like there's a simple change that I think is like I would assume is safe to make, which is like the message changed. But then I think it's a little bit different if it goes from like n errors to one error or back and forth. And my sense is that that is actually probably at least good to decide on just that part. Is it like n or one? But overall, I agree with what you said.
We already have cycle detection in some situations, so we should probably follow the same kind of patterns that we have there. I think in input objects might already have that, so we should just follow the same pattern. For validation, I can say that each location should generally only have one error, or like each cause should only have one error. So often we have an issue where two errors might happen because one of the validation rules depends on an assumption that would be validated by a different validation rule. So often we need to actually break out of that and say, if this isn't the thing we're testing, we check to see if what we assume to be the case is the case. And if not, we just exit at this point. We don't raise an error. We just assume another validation rule is handling that. So we may need to do similar here. But by the looks of the errors that we're referencing here, I think each of those fields are technically invalid because they form a cycle from that point. So I think it is reasonable to have n errors. Like if you're looking at this in your GraphQL in your editor and you're looking at the GraphQL schema, you would expect to have red squiggly lines under each of these three places because each of the three places is technically currently broken.
Seems reasonable.
Okay, so it sounds like the movement forward here is basically everything's in place and it just needs people to cast their eyes over it. Is that accurate, James, or is there any further changes?
Yeah, I think that is accurate. I think um, I would say there's maybe two things. One is I think we're like mostly so far in agreement around like the number of errors, and I owe a follow-up to make sure that this at least fits the pattern that existed before around like other kinds of cyclic inputs. So I'll take a look at that. Um, and then Martine raised an issue around a specific kind of error for like a diagnostic case, and I think we are also agreed that that is not critical, but I will try to fix that as well. Um, and oh yeah, last thing is performance. I was looking at it earlier today, and I realized that the performance was not good. So I think there is I think a job for a reviewer to at least help me figure out how to validate the performance. And I will do the work, but I think I need some guidance there. So I say this out loud to anybody in the room that thinks that they might be the reviewer on this, is that mentally file performance as a potential issue here.
Awesome. Yeah, it might be worth adding that note to the pull request thread as well. I think because this is a sorry, Yakov, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say I can try to set up a different pull request that that just adds a benchmark. We have a benchmark suite, and I can try to do that.
Yeah, fantastic. That sounds good. I was going to say, because this is a schema validation rather than a query validation, the performance isn't as critical. It only needs to be done once at startup rather than being done on every request. But nonetheless, performance matters. And yes, we should definitely pay attention to that. Okay, fantastic. Thank you, everyone. If there's nothing else, we'll move on to the next item. Okay, so we'll move over to Rob with prohibiting root mutation and subscription types from implementing interfaces.
Give me a second. I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, can you guys see GitHub?
Yes, we see a Chrome window or something like that.
Okay. So been working on defer and stream, reviewing the spec PR for that, and we have been reviewing the validation rules. And we made this decision a while back that we don't want to allow defer or stream on root, mutation, or subscription fields because their special mutation fields are executed sequentially, subscriptions, just easier to avoid that. So how do we write a validation rule for that? One way to do it would be to kind of implement what we have in collect fields, where you start at the top and iterate through all of the fragments at the root level to find any fields, check the directives on them. Or you could check every directive and check what type that's on and see if that type is the root, mutation, or subscription type. Second one is a lot easier and simpler. I kind of have an example of that here. But notice that it causes a problem. You could bypass this rule if your mutation root or subscription root implements an interface and you have a field on that interface fragment that is deferred or streamed. So I have the example here. Can you guys see that? So this is the top level field. The type of it is the interface type, but this is allowed because the mutation root implements that interface. So this is I think this is kind of weird. I'm wondering if anyone has any use case to do this. Should we not allow it and then make our validation rules easier? Or should we rewrite this rule to do the more thorough iteration approach where we go check things from the top down? And then the next question after that is like, if we're okay with this, do we also want to do the same thing and prevent these root types from being union members? So yeah, any thoughts on that? Matt, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, so I think it was an explicit choice to not enforce that query, to basically treat query as a type that can go anywhere in the graph. And there's some really important use cases for this, specifically around like if you want to, for instance, allow a form of like nested querying, you may want a field that, like, for instance, changes the context of what viewer you are presenting for the child part of the graph.
Yeah, definitely agree on that. This proposal is only for root mutation and subscriptions to prevent interfaces on those.
But at that point, there are, so once you start getting that class of thing where you have like a field that returns the root type, you then have the, like, it is actually a somewhat natural thing to be like, oh, actually, I want that field to return an interface of which my graph's root type is one, some other graph's root type might be another. If I'm coming from my graph, then I'm always like, the root type is a specific subgraph root type. And it's like that wiring happens in a like composition of subgraphs. It's almost like one mechanism of achieving federation. And I don't know how many people need this. I don't know if we explicitly, I don't think we
but for mutation, Matt, for mutation specific, I can see that with queries and stuff, right? But for mutation specific, I mean,
yeah, I guess. Oh, so this is only for mutation and subscription, not
This is only this is only for mutation and subscription. So you're right, query can be referenced in all sorts of places across queries, mutations, and subscriptions, and that makes sense and it's useful, and it's quite common for query to implement the node interface, for example. But for mutation, it doesn't make sense for the mutation type to even be embedded in a query. Like that's mutations are where side effects happen and they're not allowed to happen in queries. It doesn't make sense for it to happen in subscription. And similarly, subscription responds to event streams. It really generally doesn't make sense to have that in a query or a mutation. So these things are mutation and subscription generally wouldn't be embedded as far as I'm aware. And if someone uses things in this way where they do embed them in other places in their schema, this is what we want to discover. And because I don't think they really appear in those places, I think that it doesn't really make a lot of sense, or I haven't seen a use case for putting an interface on the mutation root type or the subscription root type. So again, I'm keen to find out if other people have ever seen schemas that do that, or that have a use case for that.
I guess the only way that we would end up in that world is if we expanded the spec to allow nested, nested
mutations.
Nested mutation
Serial
fields,
types.
nested serial types. Yes, that's what I was looking for. And this would possibly close us off to some of the benefit of that.
Yeah, but yeah, like I'm just, as I would ask myself, like, do we want support for serial types mainly because we want to have something like namespaces? Like because when I see people doing this, right, it's kind of they are trying to have a nesting kind of a namespace structure, and it's kind of, in my mind anyway, the wrong tool.
Oh yes, it's the wrong tool for namespaces.
I guess the other question is just like, we already have to do like defer merges, right? We already have to do the recursive algorithm for defer validation or defer and stream validation that like across fragment spreads they merge. Is this just a like extension of that validation where a defer on a root level at a root level location does not merge ever.
I think
Because
we just didn't want to, mostly like for mutations, didn't want to have to answer the question of what happens to serialization of root fields when one of them or more of them is deferred.
yeah, that makes
What do you mean by
sense.
merging?
So like you've already built validation. Like if you have two defers at the same level that they must like do we have that they must like have you can't have the same defer of the same label in different.
I think we have
Yeah.
stream, for example, where stream must have the same initial count if it's on
Okay,
the same
yeah.
field. I think. Is that right, Rob?
I think that we just don't allow more than one. We don't allow different streams on the same field. And
Yeah.
we do that check inside of the existing validation rule, the fields can merge rule.
Yeah, so it's the fields can merge rule is the expensive rule. But
Right.
at the point where we already need it, this like it's the exact same expense or actually substantially less, but to do basically the like walk through fragments. Basically, I think it's more disruptive to lock down mutation and subscription from having interfaces than updating the validation to walk through fragment spreads.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And I was going to say that if there's any kind of hesitation for this at all, I would revert back to doing it the other way.
But I don't know if people feel very strongly that they would like to push back defer and stream in order to prevent implements on mutation and subscription types, which maybe we should do also, like, but I think that is should not be in the path of defer and stream.
Yeah, I think at the moment, if we were to put that limitation in place, it would actually ease getting defer and stream through because now we can just stick with the existing simpler rule. That said, I think the outcome of this discussion, and you made a really good point here, is essentially if we do go for serial types at some point in the future, which is something that has been discussed, so it is potentially on the cards, then interfaces on the mutation type could make sense. And I think that's enough to say, okay, let's do it the proper way. What do you think, Rob?
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Okay. Awesome. So we'll treat this one as RFC rejected, do you think?
Yeah, unless anyone else feels that we should keep it open and keep exploring, that I'm okay with that.
Let's leave it open for a while. I think the discussion of it, I think, has value in general anyway, in terms of like what shape should our schemas be, particularly for example, the subscription type. Does it even make sense to have an interface there? But without the motivation of stream and defer, there's not a huge amount of value in prohibiting it. Like we're not saving ourselves from anything in particular. So I think, yeah, let's leave it open for now. But I think for stream and defer, we'll move to the more thorough validation.
Okay, sounds good. I'll leave a comment with a summary of what we discussed and leave it open, and I'll update the validation rules. All right, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Rob. The next agenda item also doesn't have an assignee. Would this be Martin? Would this be you?
Sounds like it's me who forgets the assignee every time. Is it GraphQL PHP?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, that's a very quick one. It's a break in the technical decision because this is more about governance. I've talked about this with a bunch of you already. Someone, Benedict, asked for transfer of the GraphQL PHP project to the GraphQL organization. And the consensus right now seems to be that we prefer those projects to live outside the foundation for a number of reasons. First one is we don't necessarily have bandwidth to manage all these projects, and we don't want to create the impression that they will be maintained automatically if they go inside the foundation. Also, we want a diverse set of implementations, so there's no reason to favor one implementation compared to another one, and it's good for people to be able to have their own implementations outside the main GraphQL organization. So for all these reasons, I said, and I'm probably going to decline that proposal. But if anyone feels strongly otherwise, please comment in the pull request or
By the
on
way,
the
that's
issue.
one of the strongest reasons, the last one, right? Because if you get your project into the foundation, it's like we are signing off on this implementation for this language, and actually could stifle innovation in a ecosystem.
Yep, exactly. And while I'm on that topic, I will handle the next one at the same time. I documented this in a pull request. Let's see if I can find it, or if anyone is faster than me. So we can track the decision. Almost there.
I've shared the link
Yes.
into the chat.
Yes. Thank you, Benji. So same thing here, Sarah. Also, this is mainly asking for feedback. We don't need to discuss this too long, but if you have opinions, please comment. I'll leave this open for a couple of weeks, and unless we have any objection, I will merge or close by then.
So I have a couple of immediate thoughts on this. One is let's move it to the very bottom of the page because I think the getting involved should probably be higher. Secondly, I'm a little bit concerned that the title Project Adoption Guidelines suggests that we are generally open to adopting projects, and that's not really the case. There has been a couple of cases in the past where we have adopted a project, but it is very rare. Normally, the projects that we work on come out of the working groups themselves rather than being pre-existing projects that then get adopted. So I wonder whether it's maybe setting the wrong tone, and maybe more of a sharing the reasoning. In fact, there's the list of projects, I think, is just above that. So just sharing the reasoning of why those projects exist might be a better approach. Not sure.
And maybe we can just remove the section header. It will follow up nicely. Like we have a list of projects and we say why these projects are in the GraphQL organization.
Yeah, I think I mean you've got text here that is saying to request adding a new project, please open in an issue. So I think maybe a few more bits of this might want to be removed as well.
Yeah. That's good.
But in general, I think one of my concerns about adopting this, in addition to the concerns of like stifling the ecosystem, which I really do think is a significant concern, is also just like maintenance burden. We have had trouble in the past maintaining GraphQL JS. And if we're also adding to that we need PHP experts to continue the maintenance of a PHP project as well, I think we're going to start to struggle. And we don't really want a project that is under the GraphQL Foundation itself to become abandoned, especially if it's the production dependency of a number of projects and there's nowhere that we can sort of direct you to instead. So personally, I think this would be better for a community repository, like create an organization for it or join an existing community organization. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they could simply create something like GraphQL Java, the organization GraphQL dash PHP.
Oh yeah. No, actually, they tried, but someone is quoting the name. So if you have any contact at GitHub that can reclaim the name, like it's a very weird username, no contribution ever, no activity, no contact information. So it feels like they should be able to claim the name, but I don't know how to do it.
I can, unless anyone else has a good connection with GitHub, I can send a ping through to a couple people there and see what the result is. I definitely am not promising anything, but maybe we can do something on that.
Because they looked like they were open to that. They said it was a very good option, but yeah, they need the name.
I think moving to an organization is often a good choice. It helps you to add like multiple maintainers and give multiple people like ownership over the project, which is quite good when you're planning like succession planning and stuff like that. But equally, having it under just someone's name is also often quite good because it kind of lowers the barrier to forking it. Like it becomes from Steve's repo to Alice's repo, and that's totally fine. So either way, but yeah, I would encourage the organization approach. I think we're done on this topic. Yeah. So the next one is we just did two. So the next one is GraphQL over HTTP. Is this also you, Martin?
Anonymous, yes, it's me. Yes, we started the GraphQL over HTTP spec 8 years ago, so it's high due for release. And over time, over those 8 years, we've added a lot of text to the GraphQL over HTTP spec, to the point where I feel a bit uncomfortable sending it to like new people outside this group who are not seasoned GraphQL developers. So this is a proposal to move the legacy bits of the protocol to an appendix. So it stays there. It's also recommended to be compatible with it, but it makes a clear difference between what is the spec moving forward. And most importantly, it will allow us in the future like to evolve. Like it does not commit us to maintaining the legacy part forever. So there's quite a bit of discussion in that thread. I haven't had time to read your last message, Benji. I'm sorry. Looks like the question you had is we want to make the recommendation. Do we want to make the recommendation normative? Which at first time seems like I don't really want, because I don't want the legacy part to become normative, but I haven't dig really into the details, so I'm not sure.
Okay, so let me I've been involved in the GraphQL over HTTP working group for a little while. When we first started it, the aim of it was to effectively encapsulate what the status quo is. So describe how servers work today, how clients work today, and then as a secondary goal, move us towards the future. So one of the big issues, as everyone I'm sure is aware, is like GraphQL has this reputation for like 200 OK. And primarily this comes down to the issue of using JSON as a content type. The main reason is JSON can come from any intermediary server. So if you get a response that's JSON and it doesn't come with a 200 or a 2XX status code, you don't know that that has come from GraphQL. That might have come from some authentication middleware or some intrusion detection or rate limiting or any other server that's in the middle, any other middleware, anything. So we just used 200 OK, but that then meant that we didn't have like observability and monitoring. So one of the big changes in this spec a few years ago was introducing a new content type, application GraphQL response plus JSON. And this means because the response has this content type, you can say, this is a GraphQL response. It doesn't matter what the status code is. We know we can trust this. So that's really good. And it means that now we can use these richer status codes and suddenly our observability stuff is much more useful. The little debugger in the web browser when you're building your web app is more useful because you can see those status codes right there. Fantastic. Except what about all the servers that have to now support both old clients using application JSON and want to support new clients with the new media type? If we require the servers to support application JSON, then we've not solved the observability problem, right? Because all the old clients are still just going to be sending 200s, and our systems aren't going to know that there's, failures happening and things like that. So I think the motivation for this was to essentially move the legacy support into an appendix, stop requiring new servers to support it, and basically saying, new servers, you don't have a legacy, you don't need to support this, so let's just drop the requirement for it. But if you do have a legacy and you do need to support it, here's an appendix that tells you how things used to work. That sounds quite good. My main concern was essentially, even if you have a new server, if you have a new developer that you bring on board and they go and look at like YouTube or they go and look at some article somewhere or a large language model, and it tells you to use a client that is long deprecated or long abandoned, it's going to send content type. It's going to send except GraphQL. Except JSON. And if your server rejects that, that's going to be a problem. So my main issue with the original version of this was that basically it's going to break this huge legacy that we have of having used JSON all the time. The current proposal is essentially we're much more forward about that and saying, hey, there will be, or there probably will be requests that use the old media type. Here's how you can handle it. You can either do the full legacy support, or you can just respond with the new media type. Just say, yeah, they'll probably handle it. And for something like curl on the command line, where you do like curl --JSON, it's not going to validate the response type anyway. So those old scripts, rather than stopping working with like a 406 not acceptable, are now going to continue to work. They're just going to have a response header that they're ignoring that has a different value. If there are clients out there, however, that do validate response headers and do check that content type, those are still going to fail. So this is still like a breaking change for those. So what the latest proposal is that we've factored in as a non-normative note into this is if you receive a accept JSON and you're gonna respond with a 200 or a 2XX anyway, you might as well respond with a content type application JSON because you're not limiting the status codes that you have. You don't even have to implement the appendix. Like literally, you don't even have to implement, you don't have to read the appendix. It's literally, if you would have given a 200 under the current new media type, then you can do that exact same thing, but with the application JSON content type. And so you've managed to then make any successful or partially successful GraphQL response non-breaking with this spec change without people having to implement the appendix. So then the only thing that the appendix is there to serve is the error case. What happens if there's a validation error? What happens if there's server downtime? What happens if there's any of these other situations that we want to respond through GraphQL rather than a middleware for? And I think that's a much, much narrower set of things that we're breaking. We're essentially saying the errors for an error page might now change to be a generic error rather than a specific error. But for the rest of GraphQL, it would be mostly non-breaking.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's essentially what we also do. Like if you send us application JSON, we respond um, with a new accept header content type, and to just injecting in that case application JSON is a good way forward.
So
The,
just to confirm there, what you were saying there is you think it's okay to take what you do currently, which is to use the new media type, and if it were a 200, to replace that with the old media type
Yes,
for legacy reference.
that's a good if you want to support legacy in a non-disruptive way. That I think it's a good escape hatch. But for me, the problem, Benji, that's also what I argumented. There's a lot more in the pipeline, and with the legacy thing, we basically erase the status codes that the user factor now in. And that is kind of unexpected for many users then suddenly that it although they programmatically added these status codes, we are erasing them because of the legacy format. But with that, it's basically if it's 200, we just throw in the old format. I'm okay with that. And in the error case, they just get the new format with the errors. It's anyway broken.
Yeah, so I think we've done quite a good job of pushing one way, pushing really hard the other way, and then finding the middle ground that actually is the minimal breaking for old clients, whilst also giving the maximum value in terms of HTTP status codes. So I'm pretty happy with where we've landed there. I'm still uncomfortable that there is probably clients out there whose error handling we're going to be breaking. So I'm not 100% on board, but I'm definitely a lot more on board than I was a month ago when this was originally proposed.
Yeah, I thought like the whole discussion was healthy, and to really get out what the difference in opinion is. Like for this, it was a very healthy discussion, I think.
we release, right? That's what we said.
Well, let's make
RFC3.
it let's make it a normative thing, and then yeah, let's get it shipped. I think it is worth finding out if there are applications that this is going to break and see whether this is actually worth considering a little bit further. Because this is a significant divergence from what the GraphQL over HTTP was set up to do in the first place, which was just encapsulate the current status. But we are like, if we make this normative, then we are massively reducing the breaking nature of this change, I think.
Yeah, I also think the problem is we set 8 years ago we set out to do that, and since then the landscape changed. Like also the whole framing, how users want to consume it. We have a lot more feedback what people want, right? That's why I think the changes we did throughout the journey really reflect the ecosystem state.
Okay. Are you happy, Martin? Are we good to move on?
Yes, can we get this out for calls?
We'll see.
We'll
Directives on directives. Benoit.
Yeah, just a quick update about directives on directives. As a reminder, the spec PR is here, sent in the chat, and it's on RFC2 right now. And the GraphQL JS PR that implements it, which I also send in the chat, has been merged. So thanks a lot, everyone, for your reviews and comments. And thank you, Jakob, for helping merging it. So now the next logical step is RFC3 accepted. And so I guess my question is, do we feel it's ready to be merged? or are there any pending questions or remaining things that I can do to help make that happen, basically?
Let me just go off on a tangent for just a moment. Thank you, Benoit, for sharing that. Last year, we decided that we were going to try and release spec versions more often. And at that point, we were suggesting that we would do it before the conference each year. This conference has obviously come a lot sooner this year, May versus September. So I don't think we've had enough time to like set up for that. So is the working group generally keen on just like sticking with kind of a September cadence? I think that's probably the easiest, just a fixed every year aim for around September for a spec cut. I'm seeing a lot of nodding. So yeah, okay, cool. That factors into how cavalier we can be with like saying, yeah, this is RFC, let's merge it versus holding back, right? Because it depends on how long we've got to review it before it hits that window. So back to the discussion. Benoit wants to know whether this is ready for RFC3. Has anyone read this proposal already and feels that it's ready to go or that it needs something?
We have it in Apollo Kotlin, but I'm not sure how many people actually using it. Like we are mainly using it to deprecate our own directives.
Yep.
And since we're open source, we don't have feedback if everything works well.
Yeah, we have not yet implemented this in Relay or our internal stuff, but it is very obvious that we want it. So I would have feedback if I had gone through and implemented.
So in reviewing the PR, things look good to me, but that was mostly for a functional check, and I probably should look at the verbiage more. But so I'm hopeful to do that.
Matt, I'm interested to know, do you see anything in here that you anticipate might cause issues when you integrate it with Relay, or might be any omissions around it or anything like that?
No. In fact, like everything here, I currently have like a structure that very naturally wants to be exactly what is being exposed here. So in fact, the opposite, where it's like this actually makes directives more similar to everything else in the schema, which actually makes it easier. Like it simplifies more of our code paths than makes them more complex. So yeah.
Okay, awesome. I've added the next stage label to it, which should mean that in the RFC tracker, it will be bumped up and shown as such. It doesn't currently have any approvals on the spec pull request. So for now, I'd recommend that we revisit this. I'd like to see some approvals on here when people have read it. I personally think that this is probably what we'll end up merging. So I think it is probably ready for RFC3, but it does need some reviews, potentially some editorial there. But yeah, I think you've done everything you need to do, Benoit, and now it's just giving everyone a poke every month and saying, "Have you merged it yet?"
All right. Sounds good.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for your work on this. I think everyone's been looking forward to this for a little while now. Okay, that brings us to the end of the written agenda. So I will hand over. Is Mark still here? Mark's disappeared.
He had to leave.
We were too fast.
Alas.
He's coming back, but we need to
I can
do something for the next 5 minutes.
if I have to, then I can ask you people a question. I've been thinking about the problem recently, and I do this sometimes. And who's the person that, or who are the people that have opinions on namespaces?
When you say namespaces, do you mean namespaces in a GraphQL schema?
Yes. We don't have to discuss this right now in the spec in the main working group. I'm just wondering who I should talk to, because
There's Matt raising a hand.
Yes, strong.
Are you pro or are you not pro namespacing? That decides if you're in my group or not, you know.
Yeah. I am I am pro, but there's a whole host of ways that getting it right is annoying.
Maybe to give some input from where I'm coming from. I'm not the usual schema organization namespacing point of view. I don't have this angle. Like I don't care about the mutations being in the root and whatever. So it's not like that I want to organize the schema better. It's more what I've seen when I played around with LLMs, that GraphQL is actually pretty good in doing, or LLMs are pretty good in querying GraphQL. It's a very easy way to access data. And technically, if you take a GraphQL schema and you could namespace it, then you could technically also merge schemas based on
So
namespace.
yeah,
That would be very interesting because there would be a viewer type from Facebook and a viewer type from Shopify, and you could technically say that this is the same viewer based on some field that they share, and then you would suddenly have a federation key, right?
yeah. So that's really interesting. I am currently deep in the weeds on schema subsets, and we have a relay compiler crate that is allows exclude, merge, and intersect. And it would be nice if we had those as first. If we had, basically my approach is I want very strong subset dependencies without requiring the full, depending on the full schema in order to use any of it. But that is I'm kind of getting away with, well, we have Buck and build tooling that does this, so we're just taking the schema that we have and slicing it up kind of arbitrarily and building the graph of dependencies and aggregations in a parallel structure. But yeah, it would be nice if that was not necessarily a parallel structure, which is not necessarily namespaces, but it could be. It's almost like
the namespace would have to compile, so to say, in itself, right?
Yeah, it's almost schema packages in the form of an NPM package or a module. It's is it a namespace that we want, or is it a module that we want?
Yeah, I mean, Quay also had the term, I think, subschema.
Yeah.
But there in this space there is something, and we could improve the interaction with LLMs a lot if we explored this space and found it's an explorative task, right?
It's schema composition without federation.
Well, it can't be. the thing is that it can be, and this is, I think, where it becomes very interesting because I think it's a very, very bad idea to federate things that you do not own. Like you have to own the schemas, otherwise things, yeah, things are not good. You will not have a good experience. But in case of interactions with LLMs, it doesn't really matter when the schema changes because they explore it anyway every time that I send a prompt. So it's like it's not a client that I break when the schema changes. I may break a contract or whatever. I was just, thinking about back in the days, there was a thing called hypermedia. Um, uh, and it was, advertised as being the new way how the web works, hypermedia, ST. I can't remember what HQS means, but um, and essentially the point there is that you link together any website can link together resources from anywhere, which is a beautiful concept which no one cared about. So with GraphQL, you could technically, with namespaces in the very like broad sense, do something very similar, right? You could just say that the ID that is returned from this field is actually the profile ID from Facebook, and this then allows you to fetch your profile and whatever you expose. So it's just an interesting concept to think about. But I also know that opinions are strong on namespacing. So
Yeah, it's like we should re-explore this area. I think in the past, like in the last 8 or 10 years or 10 years, I was always on the side that the complexity is not worth exploring. Because we didn't have the context problem that we have with LLMs. But and you could find a solution for all of this quite easily without introducing a complex concept like namespacing. But now it might be worth re-exploring this.
I have to drop, but thanks.
that was it.
His namespace was too much.
That was it.
I also have interest in these areas. So essentially, there's three different things that have come out of this conversation. One is like namespacing for schema organization. One is like sub-schemas, like subsetting schemas for AI, and the other one is composition. And I think that the solution to all three of these may be the same thing, or it may be completely different things. So personally, for like namespacing schemas, for schema organization, for like you've got the mutation type and it is huge. I think that that's quite solvable with what we already have in GraphQL. We use the camel case naming structure. But we are allowed underscores. We just don't use them. So we could treat the underscore as a dot if we wanted to, right? And we could have our tools like graphical use like underscores, gather the prefixes together and structure things in a nested way without actually having to change how GraphQL works at all. It's just a presentational thing at that point. So there are options on that front that we could explore. Previously, we've discussed doing this like by introducing like the dot character and using that. But I think that that is much more useful for composition than I do for actually just like structuring your GraphQL schema. I do also think that we probably want serial types. So that's when it comes to specifically mutations. But that isn't going to solve, for example, subscriptions, which have the same issue of one root namespace for all of your event producing fields. So you wouldn't have like nested subscriptions. That would be a different problem. But yeah, I think these are all very generally interesting topics, Pascal. So I'd love to be included in whichever one of these conversations it is that you wish to lead.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm running out of work in the hotel working group.
So you're figuring out what's next.
Yeah, I need, I need, I need to get busy.
Got to keep you out of trouble. Awesome. Mark, you have come back. You have the floor to talk with us about gaps. We have said nothing about it.
Okay. Yes, thank you, Benji. Well, I think probably everyone here has heard about gaps already, but just like the 20-second thing, it's this new home for community written specs, anything that doesn't quite fit in the GraphQL specification itself. Gaps is now the home for such specifications. So if you think of things like the connection spec, the cost directive, anything written in spec.md, these kind of things can be a gap, and it's trying to follow the model of PEPs. If you're familiar with Python PEPs, then it's kind of a similar governance model. This is something that we are hoping to talk about at the conference, and yeah, big thanks to Benji for kind of getting this off the ground to begin with. We're now at a state where I think we've mostly figured out the workflow. I do have a couple of open issues on some minor things, but yeah, I think we've done a lot of thinking on the workflow there. There are a few gaps that I have submitted. I think I would like to probably merge the fully qualified operation names one. Benji, I know you submitted the gap, the operation expressions one as well, which could be merged. And I guess also the point is like it's similar to spec proposals where like we can freely merge something as a proposal while it's still stage 0 or stage 1. Like we're not concerned about we're not concerned about that. So anyway, so yeah, we'll try and merge those. And then the last thing that I really want to draw people's attention to is the website. So me and Codex have come up with a website to be able to see the gaps. And if you click on the deploy preview link, the actual gaps listed on this website, they're all like hello world, lorem ipsum things. Like these aren't real proposals. This is just here to make the website look good. But yeah, let me know what you think, and then I'd appreciate some reviews, and then we'll try and merge and get it up on gaps.graphql.org. And that's pretty much it. That's my piece.
Thanks
and if anyone else has any
work on this one.
Yeah, thank you, Benji. And if people have thoughts on like the governance model, like the workflow. Last time we spoke about this, we spoke about the gap numbering thing as well. That's been resolved. That's a new thing since we last talked about this. So gap numbers now do just use the PR number that the gap was originally submitted in. I forgot to mention that as well. So there will be gaps in the gaps, yes.
For gaps proposal, do we want it to be part of this working group discussion, like bring it up, or a separate one?
That is a good question, Benji. I don't think last we spoke about this, I think we said that the discussions for individual gaps could go in the working groups that they have been proposed in. So like at the AI working group, we've been talking about the mock spec, so we could talk about that. I guess my question is maybe you have a proposal for a gap which doesn't quite fit in any of the existing working groups. And so if you're a would-be gap author and you want to meet like-minded people who are interested in your topic of gap, where would you have that discussion? So yeah, Benji, do you have any thoughts on that?
So I think most of the discussions on gaps, like a lot of what we do, is probably going to be asynchronous through like pull requests. It may make sense to have a monthly meeting or even to incorporate it into the like secondary meeting that we have for this one. This one often doesn't have on its secondary meeting, doesn't have enough stuff to fill the time, but also has too much stuff to not exist. So putting them in there for some discussion, I think, is quite viable. We do have a lot of different working groups on the calendar now. We can, of course, also organize ad hoc meetings if there is a particular gap that needs discussion. So we can set that up with all the regular stuff, all the YouTube recording, all the calendaring and scheduling and all that stuff. So that works as well. Um, from a working group perspective, the gaps is its own project. So I'm in the process of setting this up with the GraphQL Foundation, Linux Foundation legal side of things. But essentially, we've got like the spec working group, and we are forming the composite schemas working group. We're forming the golden path working group, and we're forming the gaps working group. And these all have their own like scopes and deliverables. So like the gaps are separate, very much separate from the specification. Like you don't need to implement gaps to be GraphQL spec compliant, for example. And the same is true for like composite schemas. You don't have to implement a composite schema to be GraphQL spec compatible. So they are separate projects. So that's how it sort of works from a structure point of view. But that also means it is a working group in its own right, and it can have its own meetings. Martin, you've had your hand up for a while. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I would love for this primary meeting to have some announcement section at the beginning, like quick shots. Hey, this gap is happening. No need to dive into big discussion, but and like Pascal said at the beginning of this meeting, like this is happening in hotel, and then everyone is aware that this is happening, and then the technical discussion can go into more detailed meetings.
Absolutely. And this is actually encouraged for all working groups. So everyone should take away from this. If you are making progress in other working groups, please add an agenda item to the top of the main working group, this one, and just say 1 minute update from this working group. Here's the latest stuff. Here's what we've achieved, or here's what we need feedback on, or anything like that. This is the central place to keep bringing these things back, and that can also help you draw more interested parties as you're making progress. Pascal.
I think I don't know yet if the main working group is the right place for discussions around gaps, but I also think that a lot of people in the main working group have opinions, and these are usually based on very good reasons. So it depends a bit on the gap, of course, but I would say that like it probably doesn't hurt to like have a 10-minute or 15-minute slot once where someone presents a gap, because like if they file one, like it doesn't need to be required, but it would be like we can say a best practice or something like this. Because I mean, the best case for a gap is that everyone in this meeting says, that's actually a fantastic idea. Let's not make it a gap. Let's put it into main, right? So that's a bit the thing. I guess having a place like, or establishing the stage and the best practice when you want to file a gap, then this is your first stop or your last stop, one of the two. That would be very interesting, I guess, because we have time for this normally. Not always, but normally.
I think it makes sense to encourage people to discuss gaps here for sure, and to raise awareness of them. One thing that is particularly interesting that you raised there, sort of indirectly, is should there be like a barrier to raising a gap or not? Because one of the things that we can do with gaps, for example, is we can have gaps that compete. If we didn't have the GraphQL over HTTP spec and we didn't have this initiative, right? Someone could absolutely write version 1 of the HTTP spec, and someone else could write a different gap that is like, no, I don't think this is right. We actually want status codes. We should use a different media type. And they could have done that as a separate gap, for example. And then someone else could say, no, actually, I think it should be required, and that should be the only thing we do. And those can be 3 competing gaps. And that's totally fine for the gaps system to have competing proposals. They do not have to add together. They don't have to be compatible even. But Also, if the first person who wrote this said, actually, yeah, I agree with you, they can update their gap and say, we've deprecated this gap or we've rejected this gap in favor of this other one. So they can link to others. So I don't think that I personally don't think that we should have a high barrier to creating these gaps. I think people should be able to just create them, come and talk about them. If people disagree, like they can create their own gaps. Back to you, Pascal.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, and I'm generally also in favor of not having a high barrier of doing gaps. But the problem I see is that competing standards are a problem. And as soon as you file something useful, like for example, I'm just talking about the scalars now, right? We have the same scalar for different people, which essentially is the same, but it's not quite. And if we could just, if like scalars are a bit special because essentially these implementation are already done, like we cannot change it, otherwise we would break everyone. So with the custom scaler, this is, I think, kind of a different thing. But when we now talk about cache control, like, do we really need 5 different variations of a cache control directive, or should we encourage these people to work together on one? So that's one thing. So I know we should allow to have more than one cache control directive. I'm good with that. On the other hand, we should really try to get these people on the same page, and then we have one which is widely or more broadly supported in the ecosystem. The other thing is, I think that if you create a gap and you submit the gap, and then you, I don't know, change jobs and, I don't know, become a farmer, then you have a dead gap. And then you have suddenly, you have these gaps that you have to leap over to get to the real stuff. So can people take over gaps from modders? Do we have a way how you can change a gap without the person which initially offered it has to provide feedback for it?
Yeah, I can quickly answer that one. The answer is yes. There is a metadata.yaml file in the root of each gap directory, which defines who the authors are, who the sponsors are as well. But the authors can be transferred. If you say I no longer want to be like an author or like maintain this, you can transfer ownership of that to someone else.
Yeah,
and if there's the bus factor thing going on, then the TSC or the editor role can also do that as well. So yeah, the TSC ultimately control the gaps. There is also this editor role. So there's the author, which is the person who submits the gap, and their friends as well can also be authors. There is the editor role, which is a separate group in GitHub, which I think right now is Benji, myself, and Martin. And then there's a sponsor, and a sponsor is the person from is one of those editors who approves the initial gap. So to answer your first question, it's sort of like slightly ill-defined what the role of the editor is right now, other than be the first person to approve that thing. But it's basically a subset of the TSC, maybe, and maybe we'll add non-TSC people to that group. I'm not quite sure, but I think an additional role of that could be to, in your role as being a sponsor of an incoming gap, be like, oh, hey, this is actually quite similar to this other gap. Maybe people want to talk to each other and sort of like, encourage communication and collaboration between these two gap authors, and try and gently suggest and encourage, or maybe not so gently, that you can combine forces there. But ultimately, it is like anyone can submit a competing gap, as Benji said. I think we have to allow for that, and the whole point of that is to avoid hidden silos of this gap published elsewhere on the internet. Like, it is, I think, ultimately better to have them all in one place. That said, okay, let's say an author didn't take that feedback and they really, really hated the existing gap and they have their own competing gap for a topic, like they have their own custom cache control directive. How do we guide people towards the right one? And I'm very sympathetic to that, right? For example, I'm not a Go developer, but I sometimes write Golang side projects, and I never know like which web framework to use in Golang because there's like lots of competing ones, and they all seem to have like good support. Like, which one do I know how to use? And so I could definitely see that being a problem in gaps as well. I'm wondering, we've talked about this before, but I'm wondering if sometimes you go to a restaurant and on the menu they have like certain like icons, like this one, like this is a chef recommended, like the burger's really good here, like we recommend the burger. I'm wondering if we if in cases where there are competing gaps, we can give like a this is the TSC chef's recommendation, like this is the one we kind of recommend. It is like favoritism, but like maybe that's fine. I'm curious what people think of that.
It's not favoritism, but it's favoritism.
Yeah, like maybe that is a good a good use of the judicial power that we have.
Yeah, I think we would have something, we need something else than this. I think what one of the things which is really good, which we maybe can add to the website that you showed, is something like support. So last change is maybe something in a specification which can be interesting. And then the second one is adoption, because you want to if you have three cache controls. I'm not like we're talking about a problem that we may never have, right? But when you have three cache controls and you want to implement one as a server developer, then you probably want to use the one which most people use. So having like a counter, how many libraries, and a list how many libraries implement this gap would be good. And like that's the nice thing about npm or any other package manager. You see how many people are downloading this thing, and we don't have this metric, but we can say how many libraries supported, right?
Actually, I've like Martin created this "Can I use" statistic,
Oh yes.
which is basically what server is implementing what spec draft, right? Can I use, for instance, with Apollo Kotlin, the new defer and stream? And I think like what you said resonates. Like it would be great to know if I use a certain gap. Can I use this gap with I don't know, GraphFast? And that actually would be a good statistic. Also with the RFCs, I think it's a good statistic that we should have somewhere.
Okay, so I'm taking from this like it would be useful to have some direct usage or derived usage or like some indicator
And,
of
and it
usage.
doesn't really like we don't have to like acquire like we don't have to ask server implementers if you're implementing that. It could also be like we notify server implementers that they can tell us if they have implemented one thing.
I mean, it can just be a list in the metadata file of
Exactly.
the app where you say that
Yeah,
Hatsune supports it, right? Or whoever supports.
exactly.
And then if you have a gap, then you have to go to all of the server maintainers, which are 7. No, I'm kidding. You have to go to all of the server maintainers and tell them, please implement my gap. Then you have.
No, but it would be a really cool thing to know because otherwise it's also hidden.
Okay, so like an implemented by field in metadata.yaml that ideally lists like the server frameworks or indeed client frameworks. I'm thinking of like the mock one where initially it would be implemented in like an Apollo link that would just be on my npm, and so I could say it's implemented by this like random repo that I have. But if I can convince Apollo to upstream it or something, then I could say, oh, I would replace that with it's implemented by Apollo client or something like that. So I think that's reasonable. Do people have any dissenting opinions against implemented by field?
I also have one thing on top of that. Like, do we plan to?
I just want to point out that we are at time now. So, Michael, please finish your point, but we should draw to a close.
Do we plan to put the connection specification, for instance, as a gap? I mean, that would perfectly fit in there. It doesn't fit in the spec itself.
So we have spoken to Jordan about that. I think on principle, he's okay with it. I don't want to speak on his or Meta's behalf, but I think that is the goal. And so, yeah, it's an action I can follow with Jordan.
Awesome.
Yes, we are hoping that Meta submits that. Awesome. This has been a fantastic discussion, everyone. Thank you so much for your time. And don't forget GraphQL Conf, not too long away. Looking forward to seeing many of you there. There is another one of these meetings, not in 2 weeks, because that will be during the conference. I don't think I've cancelled that one, have I? Anyway, there will be another meeting. Otherwise, see you next month. And there are many other meetings that you can come to as well. Thank you again.
Bye.
Bye.